Welcome in, everyone. I am so glad you are joining us. You, the listener, are stepping into what I think is, well, it is easily one of the most vital conversations we've ever had on this show. We are taking a journey into the mind of Bertrand Russell, specifically looking at his incredible, enduring work, The Conquest of Happiness. And our mission for this session is powerful but beautifully simple. We are discovering how to reclaim our natural energy. Russell actually gave this energy a very specific name. He called it Zest. We are going to figure out exactly what it is, what destroys it, how to get it back, and really how to use it to entirely transform the way we experience our everyday lives.
Before we jump into the mechanics of that, it's important to lay down some framing for our conversation. What we are engaging with here is strict, practical philosophy for everyday life. It is vital to note that this is not medical advice, and it is certainly not therapy. The philosophical tools and concepts we are about to discuss can help you navigate ordinary day-to-day struggles, and they may support your overall emotional well-being by offering you some entirely new perspectives. However, we are keeping our expectations ethical and grounded here. We are focusing on how shifting our attention, philosophically speaking, can positively influence our mindset.
If this episode helps you, please hit like and subscribe for the next one. Okay, let's unpack this concept of zest. When I first heard the word, my mind immediately went to baking. Scraping the skin off a lemon to give a cake some kick. But in plain English, Russell uses the term to describe a fundamental, natural interest in life. It is the energy that comes from genuine engagement with the world around us. And I want to be really clear right out of the gate. This does not come from artificial hype. It is not that forced, overly caffeinated enthusiasm we often feel pressure to project at a networking event or on social media. It is a real, grounded, quiet vitality. On-screen text overlay 1. Zest is a natural interest in life.
That distinction between genuine vitality and forced hype is crucial. Zest is fundamentally about curiosity. It is about outward attention. To really ground the concept, Russell compares it to the natural hunger a physically healthy person feels for food. Think about how a healthy individual approaches a meal. They do not eat out of a grim sense of duty, forcing the food down because they intellectually know they need calories. Nor do they overeat out of a compulsive need to stuff down their emotions. They eat because they have a genuine natural appetite. They sit down, they enjoy the flavors, and when they are full, they move on. Zest is that exact same appetite, but applied to the experience of being alive. It is a steady hunger for experience, for knowledge, and for connection. On-screen text overlay 2. Energy comes from engagement, not artificial hype.
I really like that food analogy because it immediately highlights when something is wrong. If you lose your appetite for food, it is usually a symptom that your body is fighting off a bug. So if we lose our appetite for life, if we lose our zest, it means something is actively suppressing it. Here's where it gets really interesting, because if zest is our natural default state, we have to look at what drains it. And according to Russell, the ultimate #1 energy killer is the trap of constant self-absorption.
Precisely. The inward gaze. When we are constantly looking inward, obsessing over our own internal state, it acts like a vacuum for our natural vitality. Russell identifies several specific archetypes of self-absorption to illustrate this, and analyzing them is incredibly revealing. Take the archetype he refers to as the sinner. Now, we should clarify, he is not necessarily using a religious term here. He is referring to the person who constantly judges their own flaws. They live in a perpetual state of self-disapproval. They are divided against themselves, constantly scanning their own thoughts and actions for mistakes.
Oh, let me interrupt there, because I feel like in modern terms, we would just call that intense imposter syndrome. Or maybe just being a high achiever with an intense inner critic. We are often taught that being hyper-aware of our flaws is how we improve. Are you saying that this self-awareness is actually destroying our energy?
This raises an important question. There is a vast difference between healthy self-correction and the kind of self-absorption Russell is describing. Healthy self-correction is brief. You make a mistake, you note it, you adjust, and you immediately turn your attention back out to the task at hand. The sinner archetype, however, becomes obsessed with the feeling of being flawed. The focus ceases to be on the work or the external world, and becomes entirely about their own sense of inadequacy. Their attention is trapped in an inward loop.
Okay, I see. It is the difference between fixing a flat tire so you can keep driving versus just sitting on the side of the road staring at the tire and telling yourself you are a terrible driver.
Exactly, and that inward trap applies to his other archetypes as well. He mentions the narcissist, who is entirely focused on receiving admiration from others. They treat the world and the people in it merely as a mirror to reflect their own vanity. And then there is the megalomaniac, who seeks to dominate and control their environment and everyone in it.
Wait, I want to push back on the narcissist point for a second. Isn't it just human nature to care about what others think of us? We are social creatures. Where is the line between healthy self-esteem and the kind of self-absorption that drains our zest?
It is a fair pushback. Of course, we care about our social standing. The distinction lies in where the energy is flowing. A person with healthy self esteem wants to contribute to the group, and they enjoy the reciprocal respect that comes from that contribution. Their energy flows outward, and respect flows back. The narcissist, in Russell's framing, does not actually care about the objective external world. They do not love the art they are creating. They love the applause. They do not love the person they are talking to. They love the way that person makes them feel important. In all these cases, the hypercritical sinner, the vain narcissist, the controlling megalomaniac, the attention is entirely self-directed. When your focus is entirely on yourself, you cut yourself off from the external world. The mind becomes a closed loop. And just like a room with no ventilation, the air inside goes stale very quickly. Without new material from the outside world, your energy stagnates and drains away. On-screen, text overlay 3. Constant self-focus drains your natural energy.
That paints such a clear picture. You are basically running a generator in a sealed vault until it suffocates on its own exhaust. And speaking of exhausting closed loops, that brings us to the next major killer of natural energy, which is resentment and the habit of constant comparison. The competitive treadmill.
Yes. Envy is perhaps one of the most unfortunate psychological traits we battle, and it is a massive destroyer of zest. Envy warps our perspective completely. Think about the natural function of pleasure. You possess something or you experience something and you enjoy it. But the envious person operates in reverse. Instead of deriving pleasure from what they possess, they derive pain from what others have. It is an entirely irrational investment of mental energy.
Right. It is like scanning the horizon not to find a beautiful sunset to look at, but actively searching for someone who has a slightly better view than you, simply so you can feel miserable about it. And with modern technology, with social media, we carry a portable horizon of other people's highlight reels in our pockets at all times.
That is the exact modern parallel. This comparative habit makes it fundamentally impossible to enjoy anything fully. If you are eating a wonderful meal, but your mind is distracted by the thought that someone, somewhere, is eating at a more exclusive restaurant, you have robbed yourself of the present experience. You are spending your vital energy manufacturing resentment.
Which leads us beautifully, or maybe tragically, into the next major zest killer on our list: boredom loops and overstimulation. There is an analogy in the source text about pepper that I found absolutely fascinating. Can we unpack that?
We certainly can. It is one of Russell's most enduring metaphors. He talks about the morbid craving for pepper. He suggests that a person, or an entire generation, that refuses to endure any amount of boredom becomes like someone with a morbid craving for pepper. If you keep adding more and more pepper to your food just to feel a kick, you eventually destroy your palate. You become entirely unable to taste the subtle flavors of the food itself. A normal amount of spice, which would be perfectly pleasant to a healthy palate, would seem completely tasteless to you. And conversely, the amount of pepper you require just to feel anything would cause a normal person to choke. On-screen text overlay 4. Overstimulation is a morbid craving for pepper.
That is such a visceral image, and the modern equivalent is so obvious. It is the endless doom scrolling. It is needing to have a podcast playing in one ear while watching a high-speed video on a phone while a television is running in the background. We are absolutely terrified of just sitting in silence.
Exactly. The endless pursuit of extreme excitement dulls our palate for delicate everyday pleasures. We become trapped in a vicious loop. We seek extreme rapid-fire stimulation because we are trying to avoid boredom. But that extreme stimulation exhausts our nervous system and desensitizes us. So what happens? We are left in a state of stultifying boredom and digital lethargy. We sit on our couches, feeling heavy and drained, constantly refreshing our screens, hunting for a jolt of excitement because our capacity to appreciate quiet, simple joy has been burned out.
It is the paradox of our time. We have more access to entertainment than any humans in history, yet we are chronically, painfully bored. We just lose the ability to taste the simple things. And on top of that heavy lethargy, we have the final zest killer, which is perfection, pressure, and fear.
Fear is incredibly paralyzing, and it runs directly counter to the concept of outward-reaching curiosity. A mind that is divided by the fear of failure, or crushed under the immense pressure to be perfect, cannot reach outward. When you are terrified of making a mistake, you instinctively shrink your world. You pull back. You stick only to what is safe, what is guaranteed, and what you can perfectly control.
This reminds me of hustle culture and the constant demand for instant optimization. We do not just want to learn a hobby anymore. We feel pressured to monetize it, master it, and broadcast it flawlessly.
And that pressure cuts us off from the slow, natural rhythms of life. True growth involves trial, error, stumbling, and very gradual development. It is a messy process. When we demand instant perfection from ourselves, we sever our connection to those slow, fruitful processes. We stop experimenting, we stop playing. And without play and experimentation, our vital impulses wither.
So we have a really clear map of the minefield now. We know what kills our natural energy. We have the closed loop of self-absorption, the toxic pain of envy, the burned-out palate of overstimulation, and the paralyzing grip of fear. Now for the crucial part of our mission. How do we get our energy back? What restores zest, especially when we translate these older philosophical ideas into modern life?
The very first step, the absolute foundation of reclaiming zest, is turning outward. We have to reverse the inward gaze. The text gives wonderful, vivid examples of what this outward interest looks like in practice. For instance, Russell mentions the fictional example of Sherlock Holmes. Holmes could pick up a battered old hat found lying in the street, and from the dust on the brim, the wear on the lining, he could deduce an entire life story. His mind was aggressively, joyfully engaged with the external world. Another example is a man who collected rivers. He found immense, sustained joy simply in traveling down the Volga and the Yangtzes, learning their currents, their history, their geography.
I love the river collector example because it sounds so delightfully random. He wasn't doing it to build a resume. He was just genuinely fascinated. But how do we actually cultivate that? If someone is sitting there listening right now, feeling burned out by the pepper craving of modern life, how do they suddenly start caring about hats in the street or foreign rivers?
What's fascinating here is how these outward interests connect to a concept Russell calls fructifying boredom. We might call it fruitful boredom in modern English. We have to distinguish this from the stultifying, heavy boredom we talked about earlier, the boredom that comes from a burned-out nervous system. Fruitful boredom is different. It is the quiet, unstimulating space where true creativity and observation are allowed to grow.
Wait, explain that transition, because if I put my phone in a drawer right now, I don't instantly feel fruitful or creative. I usually just feel twitchy and anxious.
And that twitchiness is the withdrawal period. You have to endure it. When you stop bombarding your brain with artificial, rapid-fire excitement, you initially feel that uncomfortable silence. But if you hold steady, you eventually create a quiet atmosphere in your mind. In that quietness, the natural appetite begins to return. Your mind, no longer overwhelmed by extreme spice, naturally begins to reach outward for sustenance. You notice the way the light hits the trees outside your window. You become curious about the architecture of a building you walk past. You begin to observe the world again, not as a threat and not as a mirror for your own ego, but as a vast, inherently interesting place.
Okay, so step one is enduring the quiet until our curiosity wakes back up. But once we are engaged with the world, we need to do something with that energy. The sources point heavily to meaningful effort and craft pride.
Exactly. Curiosity alone is not enough. It must be channeled into effort. To really understand how this works, we can translate Russell's ideas into modern psychological terms. We can look at the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and his famous concept of flow. Flow is perhaps the ultimate modern translation of zest.
Let's really break flow down because it has become a bit of a buzzword. What are the actual mechanics of it?
Flow happens when we engage in a challenging task that has clear goals and provides immediate feedback. It is the state where you are balancing your existing skills perfectly against a meaningful challenge. If the task is too easy, you are bored. If it is too hard, you are anxious. But right in the middle, you enter a state of total outward absorption. On-screen text overlay 5, flow states require clear goals and feedback.
Can you give an example of the immediate feedback part? Because if I am, say, answering emails at a corporate job, I don't really get immediate feedback. I send an email into the void and maybe get a reply quite a bit later.
That is exactly why so many modern knowledge workers feel drained of zest. Compare answering vague emails to woodworking. In woodworking, your goal is to cut a straight line. The feedback is immediate and physical. The saw either cuts straight or it splinters the wood. You know instantly how you are doing. Because the feedback is immediate, your attention is anchored entirely to the present moment. Time fades away. Your self-consciousness completely disappears. You are no longer worrying about how you look, or what people think of you, or whether you said the wrong thing at dinner. You are entirely poured into the craft itself. That total outward absorption is deeply restorative to the human psyche.
That sounds incredibly peaceful. It is like taking a vacation from yourself.
For that.
But what if we zoom out a bit? We are social creatures, not just solitary woodworkers. How do relationships and other people fit into this restoration of energy?
Relationships are entirely foundational to zest. Feeling unloved or feeling socially precarious is one of the fastest ways to kill your natural energy. Why? Because feeling unloved makes us insecure. and insecurity forces our attention inward. We become hypervigilant, anxiously trying to figure out what is wrong with us, analyzing our every move to see why we are being rejected.
That goes right back to the sinner archetype we talked about earlier.
Precisely. Conversely, reciprocal, life-giving affection restores zest. However, we must be very careful to distinguish between different types of connection. There are people who act like emotional vampires. They drain energy because they use others merely as a stimulus for their own ego or as an audience for their own anxieties. That is not affection. We are talking about mutual reciprocal connections. In psychology, there is a concept from attachment theory called the secure base. When a child feels securely attached to a parent, they do not cling to the parent constantly. The security actually gives them the confidence to walk away, to turn their back on the parent and explore the playground, because they know the safe base is there if they need it. Adult affection works the same way. When you feel safely, mutually connected to others, you are not worried about your social standing. That security frees up all your mental energy to turn outward and explore the world. On-screen text overlays 6. Affection provides security and restores your energy.
That is a profound way to look at it. The right relationships do not trap us, they launch us outward. And speaking of exploring the world, that brings up the importance of rhythm and simple pleasures. There is an anecdote in our sources that really stuck with me. It is about a young child who had lived their entire life in a noisy, concrete city. Upon being taken to the quiet countryside, this child experiences ecstatic, profound joy simply by kneeling down in the wet, muddy grass.
That child represents our fundamental biological baseline. We often forget that we are creatures of nature. Our bodies and our nervous systems evolved over millennia to adapt to nature's unhurried pace. The changing of the seasons, the slow growth of a plant, the rhythm of day and night. Syncing our behavior with these slow, unhurried processes is vital for maintaining zest.
And it stands in such stark contrast to how we live now. Everything is jagged. Alarms ringing, notifications pinging, traffic cutting us off. It is a constant stream of micro-emergencies.
Jagged surprises. That is a perfect description of modern technological excitement.
Oh.
And it is exhausting. Engaging with slow rhythms, whether that is tending to a small garden, taking a walk without any digital devices, or simply sitting on a porch and watching the weather change, is the antidote to that jaggedness. It literally heals our exhausted nervous systems and restores our baseline capacity for quiet, profound satisfaction.
Okay, I want to pull all of these threads together. We have talked about outward attention, flow states, secure affection, and the slow rhythms of nature. Let's crystallize this into an action plan. What is the core philosophical shift required to make all of this happen? I call it the main move. The listener must fundamentally change their internal dialogue. They must stop constantly asking the question, how do I feel? And start asking, what can I build, learn, or help?
That is a radical shift in orientation, especially in a culture that encourages us to constantly monitor our emotional temperature.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't telling people to stop asking how they feel a bit dangerous? Doesn't that lead to emotional repression? If I am deeply sad, shouldn't I acknowledge that?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is not about repression at all. Acknowledging a feeling is healthy. Repression is ignoring a fire in your kitchen. But what Russell is critiquing is the habit of pulling up a chair and watching the fire burn while obsessing over the color of the flames. We are talking about breaking a rumination loop. When you constantly take your own emotional temperature asking, am I happy yet? Am I fulfilled yet? You trap yourself in that inward loop. You guarantee your own misery because happiness is generally a byproduct of doing something else. Shifting your internal prompt to what can I build, learn, or help immediately forces the energy outward. It breaks the paralysis. On-screen text overlay 7. Stop asking how you feel right now.
That makes perfect sense. It is the difference between diagnosing a problem and dwelling on it.
Yeah.
But as we make this main move, we need to set up some guardrails. Because when people hear words like zest or energy, they tend to take it to the extreme.
Yes, guardrails are essential here. We must be very clear. Zest is not mania. It is not a state of constant, exhausting euphoria where you are sprinting out of bed shouting about how much you love life. Excitement is absolutely not required to experience zest. Calm engagement absolutely counts as zest. On-screen text overlay 8. Calm engagement is a valid form of zest.
I think a lot of people need to hear that. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be deeply engaged with life.
Exactly. Reading a book deeply and quietly, listening to a friend intently without interrupting, or carefully focusing on a piece of mending or cooking, these are high zest activities. Furthermore, small, steady actions matter far more than grand, dramatic gestures. People often think they need to quit their jobs and move to a cabin in the woods to reclaim their energy. But we are looking for sustainable rhythm, not an explosive, unsustainable burst of passion.
I really appreciate that grounded approach. Small, steady actions. So let's take this philosophy and look at how it plays out with highly practical examples in everyday life. I want to look at three specific areas: work, relationships, and habits. Let's start with work. Imagine a listener who is completely drained. They are cynical, they are tired of the office politics, and they are just fundamentally burnt out at their job.
In that situation, the typical reaction is to withdraw entirely, to do the bare minimum and let resentment build. The philosophical advice here is different. Choose one specific contribution, one small aspect of your job, and execute it cleanly. Do not worry about the overarching office politics. Do not work for the applause of your boss, and do not tie your effort to a future promotion in that moment. Focus entirely on the craft of that single task. By directing your attention solely to doing the work well for its own inherent sake, you step off the exhausting competitive treadmill and find a microflow state. You reclaim your agency.
It is about finding pride in the work itself, regardless of the environment. Okay, what about relationships? Imagine feeling totally numb or highly irritable with your loved ones. You come home, you are exhausted, and you find yourself snapping over little things like dishes in the sink.
When affection feels numb or irritable, you must practice warmth as a strict discipline.
Wait, discipline. That sounds very unromantic. Isn't love supposed to be spontaneous?
Romanticism often tricks us into believing that if an emotion isn't spontaneous, it isn't real. But waiting for a spontaneous feeling of warmth when you are exhausted is a losing strategy. Warmth can be an action before it is a feeling. Invest your attention fully in the other person without demanding an immediate return. When they speak, listen to them with genuine curiosity, as if you were studying a fascinating subject you have never encountered before. By deliberately acting with warmth and turning your focus to their experience rather than your own irritation, you begin to thaw that numbness. Action often leads emotion. You rebuild the secure base of reciprocal affection through disciplined effort.
Love as a verb. I think that is incredibly powerful. Let's move to the third area, habits. This might be the biggest hurdle for modern folks. The trap of endless scrolling, leading to that heavy digital lethargy we discussed earlier.
The key error people make here is trying to rely solely on willpower. They tell themselves, I will just stop scrolling. But nature abhors a vacuum. If you just remove the phone, you are left with the twitchy withdrawal of a pepper craving. The key is to replace the scrolling with one single interest ritual. It must be an activity that engages the mind outwardly and requires gentle focus.
So not just swapping one screen for another screen.
Correct. It could be reading physical pages of a printed book. It could be tending to a houseplant, pruning the leaves and checking the soil. It could be practicing a musical instrument. The goal is to replace the passive, overwhelming intake of jagged surprises with an active, gentle engagement of your physical faculties. On-screen text overlay 9. Replace mindless scrolling with one interest ritual.
Those are incredibly practical strategies. Let's take it a step further. We are going to guide you through a mental framework we've developed based on the source material. We call this the Zest Reset. Now, we are not going to ask you to close your eyes and chant. You're going to discuss how you can practically walk through this methodology right where you are. So if someone listening wants to execute a Zest Reset, how do they actually start? I imagine the very first step is physical.
Yes, the mind and body are connected. First, you must pause and soften the body. Just let the physical tension drop from your shoulders and your jaw. Unclench your hands. You cannot shift your mental attention outward if your body is braced for an impact.
Okay, so once the physical tension is softened, what is next?
Next, name what feels flat in your life right now, but you must do it using just one sentence. Acknowledge the staleness without judging it, and without diving into a massive journaling session about your childhood trauma. Just state it. My routine feels completely stagnant.
The one-sentence rule is brilliant because it prevents the sinner archetype from taking over and turning observation into rumination. Once we have named the flatness, then what?
Then, name one outward interest you used to enjoy. Something that used to capture your natural curiosity before life got so noisy and exhausting.
I love this step. Digging into the archives. Following that, you choose one small interest action to take based on that memory. You have great options here. You could read a few pages of a book on that topic. You could take a short walk and deliberately notice the architectural details or the trees around you. You could practice one physical skill for a short block. Or you could send one warm message to an old friend.
Precisely. Small outward actions. Next, choose one contribution action for today. Ask yourself, What is one small thing I can build, fix, or help with? It could be as simple as organizing a messy shared space or helping a colleague with a minor task.
Then, to anchor this mental shift, say one steady phrase out loud or firmly in your mind. I move outward. On-screen text overlay 10. Say the phrase steadily, I move outward.
Finally, commit to one proof action today to solidify this shift. Prove to yourself, through physical action, that you can direct your attention away from the internal noise and toward the objective world. Philosophies are useless until they are proven in the laboratory of your own behavior.
So what does this all mean when the rubber meets the road? When we try to make this shift, when we try to move outward, we are inevitably bound to run into obstacles. Let's break down the 5 most common hurdles people face when trying to reclaim their zest, and crucially, how to fix them.
The first mistake is a fundamental misunderstanding of the goal. It is believing you need extreme excitement to feel alive. People think if they aren't skydiving, they aren't living with zest. The fix for this is to deliberately embrace fruitful monotony and quiet rhythms. You must understand that a sustainably happy life must be, to a great extent, a quiet life.
The second mistake is one I am definitely guilty of. Waiting for a massive wave of passion to strike before you do anything. You sit around waiting to feel inspired before you start the project or make the change.
And you will wait forever. The fix is to realize that action precedes motivation. Start with a very small, highly disciplined action. Do the work poorly if you must, but do it. The engagement creates the passion, not the other way around.
The third mistake circles back to the core theme of our discussion. Trying to fix your mood by focusing obsessively on yourself and overanalyzing your feelings. Why am I sad? Let me spend an entire afternoon thinking about why I am sad.
That is the closed vacuum loop. The fix is absolute. Turn your attention outward to an objective interest, a complex task, or another person. The human mind needs external material to function properly, just like a mill needs grain to grind. If you do not give it grain, it grinds itself.
Mistake number 4 is a tough one for the modern world. Expecting immediate joy the second you step away from your screens or step outside. You go for a nature walk and very quickly you think, why aren't I enlightened yet?
We must return to the pepper analogy. The fix is patience. Give your sensory palate time to heal from overstimulation. Just like recovering from eating overwhelmingly spicy food, your sensitivity to gentle, subtle pleasures takes a space of quiet, and yes, a space of uncomfortable boredom to return.
And the 5th and final mistake. Using affection or hobbies just to seek validation or applause. Taking up painting just so you can post the painting online and get praise.
That turns an outward activity back into an inward ego trap. The fix is to practice genuine warmth and curiosity simply for the sake of the experience itself. Leave the ego entirely out of the equation. Paint because you like the colors. Talk to your friend because you value their mind.
This has been an absolutely profound exploration. Let's recap the journey we've taken. Zest is a natural, outward-facing energy. Self-focus and overstimulation are the ultimate killers of this natural energy. Enduring a little bit of boredom is absolutely essential for a happy life. Flow states occur when we focus fully on a challenging, meaningful task. Reciprocal affection acts as a secure base that fuels our curiosity. Shifting our question from our feelings to our contributions changes everything. And lastly, small, calm engagements are the building blocks of restored mind.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a vital realization. Attention is not just something that happens to you. Attention is a skill you can train. Where you point your attention dictates the size of your world. If you point it constantly inward, obsessing over your flaws and fears, your world shrinks to the exact size of your anxieties. But if you train it outward through deliberate effort and gentle curiosity, your world becomes as vast, rich, and fascinating as the universe itself.
That is a phenomenal thought to leave on. Point your attention outward and watch your world expand. We are just getting started on this journey, and you definitely will not want to miss our next conversation. Join us for episode 11. Affection and family, security, love, and connection. Thanks for being here. If you want the full series, check the playlist and please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.